Hey, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's February 7th, Wednesday, 9 a.m. Going to take a few minutes to look at sort of the rest of the language in our committee bill related to changes to the Act 127 transition today. And then we are going to spend the rest of the morning on H657. We have a new draft to look at and many people who want to talk to us about it. And then this afternoon, we are going to focus on climate infrastructure. So with that, Kirby, when you are ready, you are welcome to join us. I don't think you do want to connect to audio though.
I think I have it set up where it doesn't freak out.
Good.
Oh.
We could set it here on my desk. It's no freaking out. That'd be good for me.
Kirby Keaton, Legislative Counsel. I have a committee bill to share with you. The size good?
Lovely.
So Chair Kornheiser mentioned there's a part that we did not get to yesterday, which I believe is all intended to be covered right now.
Thank you.
So we have language. So for one thing, this isn't a committee bill format now. Yesterday was just language. You see, this is a Ways and Means Committee bill. And we have language that was drafted by Beth St. James and Tucker Anderson from Legislative Counsel about the rewarning of budgets under the bill. So just read through that. So a school district budget vote, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the legislative body of a school district may cancel the district's vote on an article or articles related to the FY25 budget for the sole purpose of amending the proposed budget. A district that cancels the vote on its budget article shall amend the warning for its annual district vote to state that the budget vote is canceled and shall move the date of the budget vote to a date on or before April 15, 2024. My understanding is that this is to allow districts to change their school budget, or to allow districts to change their budgets once this bill passes and the tax rate cap is gone. The next part is that there's an appropriation of $500,000 to help rewarn and repost budgets for the school districts, which will be managed by the Secretary of State. And in this last provision is the temporary authority in subsection A of this section shall supersede any conflicting provisions of charters.
So am I understanding this right? Essentially, they can cancel votes and rewarn budgets, but they are not required to do so.
Yes.
And just so folks know, that April 15th date was picked so that we would still have the data that we needed to set the yield. Because if everyone moves their votes, I mean, it will be tight with April 15th, but if everyone moved their votes past April 15th, then we wouldn't have enough information.
I think April 1st would be too tight.
That felt a little too tight, but April 1st is certainly
That's the 15th. I think it's not.
That's a 30-day warning.
I mean, I think most of them will schedule as early as they can to get out of the way.
Yeah.
There's the issue with, what's the time frame for setting the yield? We just need to have it pass it, so the.
Time to walk out the door.
Around it.
Yeah.
Consider it, right?
I mean, it would be the Senate tweaking on April 15th. It would not be us anymore.
That's not-
Send something over,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Or it would even be in conference by April 15th.
Right.
Any questions about the language from anyone? Okay. Mr. Senning, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Can you guys see and hear me?
We can.
Excellent. So I can
I'd
start
love
with
to
a little
just, like-
run through if you'd like, whatever's
Yeah,
helpful
just
for
love
you.
to hear your
and then
thoughts.
take question. Okay.
Thanks.
For the record, I'm Will Senning. I'm the Director of Elections in the Secretary of State's office. I will note I will be so for the next 2 days. So you guys are the lucky recipients of maybe my last testimony in front of the legislature.
Is this your very last week?
This is Friday's my last day.
Thank you for spending this final time with us and thanks for your time.
You're welcome. And if I may, I'll take 15 seconds while I've got you all as a captive audience to say thank you for the resolution that was passed last week or the week before. It was really meaningful, really special for me, and I really appreciate it. I worked really hard to have a good working relationship with the legislature over the years. So it felt like some of that work being acknowledged and in a really special way. So thank you.
Quite well.
With that, I will say that you've done a nice job with this draft. I think generally this draft looks good. I think it could be workable with the language in front of you right now, passed as is without any changes from a election administration perspective. My goal here, I was thinking about it, I think there are some details that aren't addressed in the language here, but I think that as long as I can be on the same page with you all about what the intent is behind the language here, that my division next week and in the weeks following can take care of those details through guidance issued by our office that are in line with what's on the page. And I'll point out more specifically what I'm talking about here. As a general matter, right, I just want you all to be aware. I always advocate for the clerks and election administrators when I come into these committee rooms, that this will be messy for them, for those that have already warned budget votes to occur on March 5th. It's going to be confusing to voters to some extent, at least. We'll do everything we can to limit that confusion. And it's going to be a burden on the clerks who are administrating the election. So just to have patience and understanding with them as they're moving through the process, I would encourage. But I think, that confusion on the voters' part and additional burden on the clerk's part is inevitable if you're trying to, make a change to the budget formula at this late date. So again, with that said, if we can make sure I'm on the same page with you about the intent, I think my office can do as much as possible to kind of eliminate that burden and minimize that confusion. So I said, there's some details that have been omitted. I'm just going to start and go through a list of items I want to bounce off of you. The first is, so you're aware that the warning date for March 5th meetings, which is the standard annual meeting date, was this past Sunday. So warnings have been posted for those meetings being held on March 5th. The ballot deadline, the deadline for the clerks to have ballots ready and available for voters is next Wednesday, is today Wednesday? A week from today. Many, if not all, at least most of the clerks that are administering these votes have probably initiated the printing process. That's going to be most true for the larger districts that use tabulators, who need to get those ballots printed by an outside print shop who can do them on ballot stock in a manner that's readable by the tabulators. There may be a few that are still hand counting their budget and other articles where they haven't printed those because they're printing them in-house and can make an adjustment now at a late time.
Will, can I interrupt you for 1 second? I'm
Sure.
realizing I don't know if I said to the committee, this is clearly outside of our expertise, and the Government Operations Committee is also looking at this language today and talking to Will today. And so if you're rest assured, there are people who understand what tabulators are looking at this language as well. Okay, back to you, Will. Thank you.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. And with that note, let me know if I'm going too deep into
No,
election
It's
issues.
really important. It's helpful for us to get our heads around this. Thank you.
Okay. And I promise I am going to be quick. I know you have a lot to do on your schedule today.
I appreciate you paying attention to this. Thank you.
And I just got an email as I was sitting down to get on with you all from the GovOps committee assistant about testifying this afternoon. So I do hope to be able to make that happen.
Thank you.
A primary point not addressed in the bill, but will be my advice to the extent that people have requested ballots for this budget vote in this school district annual meeting, right? These are not votes where the ballots are being proactively mailed as a general matter. So it's a request-based system. And our guidance would be to the clerks, if a budget vote gets canceled and postponed until later in the spring, that they would send absentee ballots for that postponed vote to anyone who had requested them initially for this vote. That's not specifically called out in the law, but again, that would be my guidance, and I hope that that would be the intent of the committee too. I think, in terms of reducing confusion and burden on voters, that would be the best approach to take, to say if you requested one previously thinking the meeting was on the 5th, we're going to send one to anybody that made those requests. I should have started here. I want to back up and make sure. I think your Ledge Council introducing the bill made it clear, but I want to be clear myself that the intent here is that if they want to cancel the vote, the budget vote, that vote needs to be rewarned on a full warning. So they can't amend the current warning, change the number in the current warning, and proceed on March 5th. Is that right?
That is certainly the intent, yes.
And I think that's certainly the way to go. And I would have strongly advised so if it was otherwise. That maintains your 30-day warning. I think that Representative Conlon was referencing, which is really important in terms of giving the voters time to process and think about and choose which direction to vote. That's the whole point of the 30-day warning. It also, so that's in terms of a voter education matter. I think that 30-day warning is important. It also would have caused a lot more confusion to be changing the number with the fact that and still voting on the 5th, with the fact that I'll get to now, which is that some ballots may already in fact have been sent out to voters. So in that regard, ballots that have been printed and potentially even have begun to be sent to voters, that next Wednesday deadline is a deadline that I was talking about for ballots. The law doesn't say they can't start earlier, and some of them may have already, having had the warning approved and posted on Sunday. Our guidance in that case is going to be the following, which is that if you've sent out ballots with the current budget number, and you end up canceling the vote on that number and rescheduling it for later in the spring, that those ballots, so to back up one step further, you all understand that the annual meetings for these school districts don't just involve a budget vote. They involve a number of other articles, right? Election of officers, potentially election of board members, and then other public questions that want to be put in front of the voters. So there's all of that other business that's going to be conducted and still be conducted in the way I read this bill on March 5th. In some cases, at least, you'll have a ballot that has that business on it in addition to the budget vote. It might have the officer votes. It might be one sheet of ballot that gets sent to folks. In case that has happened, the advice would be that when those ballots get returned to the clerks, them and their election officials are counting every other part of that ballot and just essentially ignoring the budget vote because it's no longer happening. It's like a question that shouldn't have been asked in the first place, right? So for ballots that are out in the ether now and may come back with a vote on that budget, the guidance again will be ignore the budget vote. Those same voters are going to get the follow-up ballot that just has the budget that is being counted, and we'll have a chance to weigh in when those ballots are created and sent out. For ballots that have been printed, and again, might have more business than just the budget vote, with the language here in front of me to save costs, my suggestion to the clerks would be that they could manually, physically overwrite that budget vote, strike it through essentially with black marker. As they're packaging up the ballots to send out to voters, they just take a black marker, cross through the budget article. And then it's, of course, going to be a matter of outreach on every level to explain to voters what's going on there, from the town level, Front Porch Forum, their website, any email distribution list they have, perhaps a note put in with the ballots about why the budget article has been struck out on the ballot that's included, and any messaging that can come out of our office in that regard. If they
We
haven't,
have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Representative Kingsley.
So will this affect the tabulators?
no. Again, so with the tabulator ballots, it's going to be the ovals, right, that are filled in. So if any come back voted, you just ignore those totals. For the ones that you're scratching out, that won't affect the processing through the tabulator. If somebody does fill in the oval, it'll still be the same guidance to ignore that vote. Or
I was
the
just
clerk.
thinking the machine might spit it up and say it's incomplete.
No, the machines only totally reject what's known as a blank ballot if everything is unvoted. Otherwise, as you know, it's in a voter's purview to not vote on a certain item. And so the tabulator takes that and records it as a blank vote.
Okay, thank you.
And Will, I know that, I know how incredibly hard our clerks work, and I know you're more acutely aware of that than I am. I'm curious if you have a sense of how this will be for them. I imagine that you're making suggestions that would work best for them, but I just sort of want to check in. And I know you can't speak for the clerks, but.
That's certainly what I'm trying to do, is make those suggestions that'll make it as easy as possible. As I led off with, Madam Chair, it's going to be frustrating to them. I can tell you that. I started getting calls and emails from clerks last Thursday.
I know, I'm so sorry about that. I think we sort of said something and no one warned you we had said something, and anyway, apologies for that my personal apologies to you for that.
No, you all know somehow, some supervisory unions got wind of what was being discussed and really grabbed the ball and started running with it and talking to their clerks. So I was talking about ballots where there's more than one article involved. Of course, if the budget article is the only article that they're sending out, they'll stop sending those out as soon as it's canceled. So hopefully, and then would have to reprint those ballots. Either way, you're going to be in a situation where any district that chooses to cancel the budget article now is going to have to be reprinting ballots or printing additional ballots to conduct the next vote when the new budget is settled upon and warned. So I know there is the second paragraph in the proposed legislation here is about putting some money out to cover the costs of that reprinting and remailing, and I appreciate that. I think that number is reasonable at 500,000. I in fact think that will be more than enough. If I remember correctly, we administered a reimbursement process like this at some point during the COVID pandemic, when mailing costs were covered by the legislature for one of the emergency bills. And we whipped up a quick reimbursement form in my office that we provided out to clerks that they could submit back to us. I assume that, I should have the language right in front of me, that it would cover both additional postage and additional printing costs. Yeah, I think it was all encompassing for.
Yeah, that was our intent.
Okay.
We have another question here, Representative.
Yes, Will, thank you very much. It strikes me that the most problematic population in this adjustment is the folks who have already had a budget document mailed out to them before we've intervened and stopped that. And so that if they vote that one because it has additional articles, as you say, the potential confusion and question of response will happen when the second new modified budget article goes out. And I guess I would urge, do not throw this away or some big red letters, because that's the temptation of people to say, I already did this. What's going on here? That for me is questions the outcome. And that, of course, is a legitimacy problem and needs special attention, in my view.
I couldn't agree more, and that would be definitely be part of our guidance to the clerks when you're doing the second round of mailing of the
Thanks.
revised ballots to put a note in. That's the kind of thing, I think, is that Representative Conlon talking? I have a little screen here that I mentioned off the top, you
I
know,
think that's Representative Anthony.
excuse me, Anthony, that aren't mentioned in the bill that you could potentially think about putting in there, right? You could have a clause in there that says when the revised budget ballot is sent out, the clerks shall include an explanation of why this second ballot is being sent out. But in the interest of time and moving the legislation through as quickly as possible, I think we can just commit to that on the guidance side ourselves.
I appreciate you working with us on this and issuing that kind of guidance, Will.
Sure.
Representative Brannigan?
I appreciate your time to work with us too on this. Not every community, not every school district is going to want to revoke. Some of them are such that the school directors will want to go ahead with the results of that initial vote, the one they've already prepared. So is this going to be different town to town, district to district?
It sure is by its nature.
And districts are welcome to rewarn or not rewarn. It's absolutely up to them. We're trusting school districts and school budgets.
Some it'll be voluntary, some will be involuntary, depending on what happens.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's a good point. That's why the primary means of communication and explanation is going to be at the town level. Because it's going to be hard to send out a consistent message on a statewide basis. That allows me to step back. I skipped over one point I wanted to make. You call for an amendment of the warning in the case that the budget vote is canceled. I just want you all to know that at any time a warning is being amended, throughout my time here, my guidance has been to try and call as much attention to that as possible in the places where it's posted. So what I've always suggested is to leave up the old warning and to put the new warning beside it with a big, notice of new warning, show that the change that's been made, strike the budget article through on the old warning, put a big red arrow over to here's the new budget article.
Yeah.
The next vote. So it's going to be that kind of on the ground advice and notice and effort that it'll take to reduce the confusion as much as possible. I would also point out, just so you all know, that that's a little bit the nature of the game here. Even under current general long-standing law, school districts have flexibility in when they hold their annual meeting. I wanted to point this out in reference to your discussion about April 15th also. In the underlying school law, their annual meetings can be scheduled anytime between March 15th and June 30th. And I don't know, it would be a question for the School Boards Association or AOE, kind of the distribution of those annual meetings, but I do know that there are already some that are held later in the spring than now. And so there's already variability among school district votes for voters in the state.
And we've discussed that a few times. Those few districts that tend to vote after this are small enough that they don't impact our big picture decision making very much.
That's what I figured. Okay.
Representative Taylor and then Sims.
I noticed in the proposed language, it says to vote on an article or articles. And yeah, there are other articles that would also relate to it in terms of the town might decide to have a bond vote or not have a bond vote, depending on their changes in the budget or the amount that they temporarily borrow. They need to get permission to temporarily borrow or things. There's other things that are related to the school budget. Does that complicate things, or what happens if there's more than one article that's related to the proposed budget?
I think it would just, everything I've said about the underlying big budget article would apply to those as well. And yes, it does complicate things. For me, what that will lead to is probably questions from districts and their district attorneys as to what amounts to an article that's related to the budget. And I would I would defer to their school district attorneys on that particular question and let them defend their decision about what's directly related to the budget and what isn't. I think a bond vote is a good example.
Representative Sims?
Yeah, just more of a comment. I mean, I think understand why we're doing all this and also recognize that it'll be a lot to ask folks to do, and just really appreciate the conversation we're having around what kind of template and guidance and so forth we can think is essential to making this additional heavy lift, hopefully as simple as possible. So
Yeah, I've been really appreciating sort of all hands on deck approach that's happened. You know, like yesterday, Nicole from AOE came in with like such clear communication and guidance for districts about this. Will, you are like on very short notice entering the conversation and describing very clear guidance you will offer to clerks. And I just really appreciate that very much. Do you have anything else you want to share with us? And then just for the committee, we're going to hear back from the GovOps committee on their work. Yeah, sorry, Representative Andrews.
Well, I think you said at the beginning that you feel like this bill as written is ample, but is there anything in your view, considering all these complexities, that could strengthen it and make your work easier?
I've evolved. Years ago, I would be pointing out all kinds of little things that I would love for you to include in the bill right now. All of that process around ballots that have already been printed and or sent out, might be helpful to have in black letter, but I think I'm going to leave it at that. We can work with this language and provide the guidance that we need to provide.
Thank you.
And Will, is there anything else you want to share with us?
I don't think so. Well, given the chance, I'll tell you that it's always been my guidance over the years. The election law itself, and the local election law in particular, is silent on the process for and whether or not, in fact, a whole meeting that's been warned can be canceled and moved and delayed. In light of that sort of silence in the law, my guidance has always been that it can happen. There are circumstances that occur that necessitate the canceling of a meeting that's been warned, within the 30-day period. And I in those cases where that's happened, I'll work with whatever the municipality is to say the meeting's been canceled. We're going to rewarn it for a later date, and getting that information out there. So as I was reading through this, part of me was saying, they kind of already have the underlying authority to just cancel the whole meeting and say, we're going to rewarn it sometime late in the spring. Moreover, they have that affirmative ability under Act 1 to delay their meetings right now until July 1 of 2024. So I still think it's a very good thing and necessary to have this specific authority related to this particular change in the law in this instance that you're going through. But this is where, I'm speculating too much. It's probably doesn't need to be worried about right now. But if a district were to cancel their meeting under that kind of underlying authority and just say we're canceling everything and moving it to later in the year, I wonder whether there would be any issue with that district seeking the reimbursement that is provided for in this bill when they didn't do the cancellation in the exact procedure and in pursuant to the sections in this bill. But I think given the authority and having this out there, they're going to all operate under the direction of this specific legislation.
Thank you, Will. Representative Anthony?
Would this not just be in session law?
This would be, I would think,
Yeah,
I'll defer to like counsel.
So that,
Yep.
that'll cure
And the attorneys on the sidelines also nodded in agreement with you, Will. I know you can't see them.
it.
I can talk to GovOps later about addressing that cancellation policy on a more permanent basis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions for Will? Thank you very much. Thanks for testifying. Thanks for your service. I am glad that you get to wrap up in GovOps rather than here, because I feel like that is the rightful home in the building. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Procedural question.
Yeah.
Are we gonna vote on the bill or is it GovOps and we're tagging along?
Oh, no, this is our bill. GovOps is tagging along with us.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that they've looked at the language before we
Thank you.
take any votes on it. On the language that we have in front of us, both sections, the section we looked at today, the section we looked at yesterday. Thoughts, questions?
Bill said this will work. Essentially, we're saying,
Yeah.
you know, there could be tweaks here and there, but why bother or something?
Less is more.
Less is more. That's right. Yeah.
And I already said it once, but I just feel very grateful for how much government is sort of collaborating across offices on this to get it done, given the urgency of the matter.
Appreciate that too.
Yeah.
But inspires.
Yes. So on this language, we have a vote warned for Friday for this. You know, we are trying to be as efficient and effective as possible, and we want to do good work. So just wanted to flag that for folks. If anyone feels like we could vote sooner, please feel free to let me know. We have random spaces on the agenda that we can slide things into, but I also want to give people time to get their head around what is a significant change. And so I think with that, we're going to take a break until 9:42 when we are going to pick back up on telecom.